and pledge of allegiance, please. I'll say a prayer first. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this beautiful weather. Thank you so much for all the blessings you've given us. Thank you so much for taking care of this country and for taking care of this town and for taking care of this water company. We appreciate everything you've done, and we just pray that you give us wisdom and knowledge to make the right decisions, to always do the right thing, and we pray that you protect our servicemen and women and all the first responders and everyone that helps us when we're in need. We thank you so much. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. All right. So a couple of quick announcements. We do have a quorum here. We are missing one director, Mr. Lynn.
Point of order. You have 3 vacant seats because they expired in January.
Okay. So first of all, we're not going to have any more outbursts. If you need to say something, we're going to ask that you get up there, and we haven't gotten to that point of the...
Robert,
so anyway, so we have everyone except for Darrell Lynchard here today, so we have 6 board members. Audio and video recorders are in use. We ask that you fill out the member form sign-up sheet if you need to address the board, if you'd like to address the board. Proxies available now for pickup. Ends on February the 14th at 4 p.m. 55th members meeting and election on February 18th, 2025 at 7 a.m. And voting is open that day from 7:30 a.m. until 7 p.m. and the results will follow at the end of that meeting. All right. Unfinished business. 2025 annual election of directors, proxies, and we're going to start with Mr. Krigler, and then from there we're going to have legal chime in. So Jeff, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I think what I would like to do is just kind of mention the timeline over the past week about what's happened, how that got us here tonight. We'll leave the explanation of the legal issue to our attorney. So I'll run through the timeline real quick. So I was contacted on, I believe it was the January 31st, with a question about proxies related to the election, what's acceptable, what's not, regarding the form. The question was sent to legal. On that following Monday, we decided to convene the canvassing committee. The canvassing committee met the following day. That was a Tuesday. They had a lot of discussion about this topic. After that, the canvassing committee decided to inform the board of directors and ask for input on how to proceed, given the kind of the sensitive nature of the issue. I think on Thursday we had a call with the board president and the attorney. We decided we would board president asked for a meeting, and here we are tonight. So that was on, like I said, Thursday. It takes 48 hours to notice the meeting, so that's why we're here tonight. So tried to respond to this quickly, but that process takes time. So here we are tonight. Once again, it was a question was asked of us about what is an acceptable proxy, and I'll kind of turn it over to Mr. Dunaway for that response there, and then the board can talk about how it would like to proceed relative to the other candidates and the rest.
Thank you, Jeff. Will?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the CEO indicated, a question was asked about the form of proxies. And so, as the board knows, the board has an election policy. It provides us a proxy ballot, a proxy form, which can be used if it's properly executed, can be used by someone to exercise that proxy, come to the election and vote. The question was asked, is it required that we use the proxy form that the company puts out? And the answer under state law is no. A proxy is not a form. A proxy is a document which exercises or that communicates the intent of the person who grants the proxy to the person who's holding the proxy to vote to vote in their stead in an election. So under our bylaws, i.e. under Holly Noir Water System bylaws, proxy voting is allowed. And that's all our bylaws indicate. They don't give any more specifications regarding how that proxy voting occurs. So when you have no more specifications, you rely on state law. And state law provides details on how proxy voting can be allowed. And proxy voting can be allowed under a proxy, which indicates that the person who's granted the proxy, and in this case, your canvassing board must, in fact, will determine that the person who executed the proxy is in fact a member of the water board, because only members of the water board can vote. Therefore, only members can exercise and grant a proxy to someone else. And so if we get a communication, i.e. a document, which clearly communicates and clearly is something that we can verify as a member, then it can be accepted under state law. And so that was the question that was asked, and that was the legal advice that we've given. Now, your canvassing board, and just so that everybody recalls, your election policy establishes a canvassing board. Your canvassing board consists of your CEO, your attorney, and one member of the board. In this case, it's Mike. So, yeah, that's the canvassing board, and we meet, and we always go through both the proxies. We also go through the absentee, and we oversee the election process. So when it is time to verify the proxies, and the canvassing board is scheduled to meet, the canvassing board will review the proxies and will, make a determination as to their validity and move forward.
Will, real quick,
Yes, go ahead.
So 617, it talks about original proxy.
Mm-hmm.
That's not Holly Navarre System's original proxy that we use.
No, state law allows for a proxy to be exercised either the original, right, that is a wet signature, or a facsimile, as long as that facsimile is a full copy of the original proxy. So a proxy is not anything other than a document which exercises the intent to give someone else the ability to vote that person's vote. That's what a proxy is. Unlike a ballot, obviously one couldn't produce their own ballots and show up. The ballot is the ballot. But a proxy is, it's not unique. It's controlled by state law, but it's not necessarily on our form. That's for the convenience of those who don't otherwise, have a form available. So that was the question that's asked. We have no indication we have no knowledge as to whether we will receive proxies other than those proxies that we have made available, but in anticipation of doing so, we're prepared.
And so the board back in August agreed to a certain procedure, and that procedure was for if anybody wanted to take advantage of the proxy, they should come to the building here so that their information can be verified before we give out the proxy. In that way, we can make sure that we cut down on any kind of fraudulent.
Hey, Dave, Mr. President, sorry for the
Yes.
interruption, but
Done.
do we remember, was that a unanimous vote?
Yes,
7-0.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd say we follow the process that all 7 directors approved in August, that members were aware of and used, that proxies form received from Holly Navarre Water System, the ones that we produce, so we can vet them and eliminate any fraud. I think any changes now are unethical and unfair. to all the candidates, and that proxies not obtained via the approved process be held but not counted. And if somebody wants to challenge that in court, then so be it. But right now, it's unfair to all the others that haven't had a week out there and think they have gamed the system. And in my view, it's just not fair, and it's a lot unethical if you've already voted for a process and then you want to change it under the table. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Mr. Chairman, because the motion has been made and seconded, it's now appropriate to have discussion, but I would like to be heard on this. I want to make clear that the company's policy is not a policy that was exclusive. I mean, in the sense that to the extent that the motion indicates that you have to follow and use only the proxy ballot that you approve, that is not what the policy indicates. The policy provides for a proxy form, and that certainly is an acceptable form if it's properly executed. But it never anticipated as to being the exclusive, because otherwise that would be against state law. So I just want to make that clear from the standpoint. Your policy is sound. You are following, and your canvassing board is following your policy. And to the extent that some other proxy in a different form came in and was determined to be valid, that would be consistent with state law and your policy also, just to be clear.
I think we have to follow the advice of our attorney that says if state law allows for it not to be on a specific form in order to be valid, then we have to allow that proxy as being a valid proxy.
So Jeff, just talk us through. So I'm a member. I email, I contact you, I walk in and ask for a proxy form. You mail them to the address that we have on file for the members, eliminating fraud, confirm that they are a member via that, and they get one form. So how do we keep that from Joe Campbell and going down to Gulf Breeze and having, Samantha down there in Gulf Breeze, but my address is here because I can read the property appraiser site? How do we?
Don't know the answer to that.
That's my concern.
Mr. Chairman, is this an open discussion?
Not quite yet, Jerry, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Let's let the board have this
Because I want
conversation
to
real
address
quick.
what Joe just said.
Okay. So basically, we have two choices, right? We could stick to what everybody agreed to back in August and not accept any proxies unless they were gotten from us and it was verified. Or we can communicate with all the other candidates today, that they're free to print out their own proxies.
So, Mr. President, if I...
I'm sorry.
I
So
think we have a
last
third-
meeting, I'm sorry, Don. How many proxies were there last time I asked? 9?
9.
Okay.
9, okay. Don, I'm sorry.
I think we have more than two options. Personally, I think we have more than two options, and if this motion fails, I'll propose another one. But personally, I'd like to keep, with all due respect, I'd like to keep the discussion on the motion at hand that we need to
Okay.
decide yes or no on.
So the motion at hand, I agree. Any other discussion on the motion that Joe made? All right. Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm Jerry Foster, live at Lola Circle, just down the street here off of East Bay Boulevard. I came up last year to register my vote because I knew I was going to be out of town the day of the vote last month. And I was told, Jerry, I know who you are. You have to go to your car if that's where your license is and show me your license. And I concur with what Mr. Campbell just stated, that you don't know who's signing these documents out there. And I point yesterday, Sunday, at St. Sylvester Church, there were people in the parking lot as people were coming out of Mass at St. Sylvester Church, asking people to sign proxies to vote for certain candidates. How do you know that that individual, first of all, understands what they're doing? And how do you verify the fact that somebody else didn't take their name and address and sign a piece of paper? I was not informed about this meeting until a couple hours ago, and I said, well, I don't understand how you can go about doing something that the general public, we as members of this organization, have given us rules, and now you're changing the rules. To me, that doesn't make sense. It's not good for the corporation. No offense, Mr. Dunaway, with regards to your comment about what the state says, but we have a procedure in place. And I'm just saying, even though there were, 9 last year, who knows if there's not going to be 19 or 29 or 2, even 2 that are wrong could sway a vote. So I concur with what Mr. Campbell has suggested and seconded. So I just want to make you aware that there are people out there asking for people to sign proxies, and I thank you for the time. No.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Foster.
Thank you for the time
Thank you very much.
and your consideration.
So we have another gentleman who wants to speak.
Martin Deckham, 9050 Sunset Drive. This body abides by Robert's Rules of Order, which provides for a point of order to raise a sensitive issue. Just to be clear that I was not being rude, that I was actually complying with the rules. It's important to look at the history of why the Holly Navarre water system has the proxy process in place that it does. And it's because board members, such as Darrell, who is missing, and his friends used to go dumpster diving, pulling proxies out of mailboxes. This isn't any secret. They've joked about it for years. So, to prevent that kind of, whatever you want to call it, let's call it shenanigans, this board has introduced a policy which, though cumbersome, verifies a number of things. That somebody comes in, they provide their license, so that they verify that their identity, that they are who they say they are, and their membership is then verified. Then they execute a form which includes a number of facts which are salient to proxies. The member who is proxying their name and address. Also, the person to whom they are proxying has their name and address. These aren't incidental facts like, hey, this I isn't dotted or this T isn't crossed. Those are warranted facts. So essentially what you all have discussed here is a difference between the proxy process and the form. Speaking as a candidate, I would have no objection if somebody came in and they went through that process and they said, hey, I am this person here, I've had my identity verified, I've had my membership verified, and the member to whom I want to proxy is a legitimate member, and here is their address, but I want to use my own form. If they wanted to use their own form, as long as it has all the salient data that this board has already provided, then go with God. But if somebody wants to use some kind of like faked up looking form, such as the one that I was presented with at the same church as Jerry, then I would object to that. So the way that we can comply with state law is by using the same process, but not necessarily the same form. Now, any body that votes, it doesn't matter if we're talking about a public district or jurisdiction, or a corporation, or a club, has not just the right, but the obligation to preserve the integrity of its elections. The integrity of the Holly Navarre water system elections is horrible, and it's widely known. So this body has instituted a process to eliminate those well-known abuses. The other issue that Mr. Campbell raised is about changing an election process at the 9th hour. As recently as last week, the Holly Navarre water system was telling people that they would not accept any proxy at all anymore, that the deadline was December 20th. Again, as a candidate, I had people call up the system. I walked into the doors with a witness right there and said, I would like to proxy, because I was interested in what was going on, trying to verify the rumors. And I was told directly that proxy window is closed. So there is that element of fair play of giving adequate notice to candidates, because the rights that affect candidates are also affecting the rights of voters as well, in this case, the members. So in this situation, when you're looking at a last-minute change, people say stuff like, it doesn't smell right. But if you look at the report on elections of the Carter-Baker Commission, which is named for Democrat Jimmy Carter, Republican James Baker, one of the things they cited as a surefire sign of fraud was changes to election rules at the last minute. And in this case, if this body were to change the election rules at the last minute, it would not give the appearance of impropriety. It would make you look like crooks. So we can go through all the hearsay about what has gone on at the Holly Navarre water system, about who's doing what or whatever else. But I can guarantee you that there is a crook somewhere in the Holly Navarre water system. Now, when all this election stuff is done, if me and my team are elected, or Bill and Doug's team are elected, we're going to start going through the books to see where that money went, to see if there is any impropriety. But if we lose, we're going to sue for the same exact records and get them. So really the way I see this playing out is, in order to preserve the appearance of fairness, or as close as we're going to get to it, the best thing for the Holly Navarre water system to do would be to continue with its current proxy process. And whether somebody's form is different really doesn't matter, as long as their form has all the same substantive information as the form that has been promulgated by the system previously. And second, if you look at the complexity or the burden of the proxy process, where someone has to come in, present they have to physically appear. They can't email and say, hey, I want a proxy. They have to physically show up, show a license, verify who they are, and then they have to execute a form. Well, let's just eliminate the middleman. That person could execute a ballot even easier right then. So instead of me showing up and having to do all this stuff and, hey, I'm going to proxy to Nancy, they could just give me a ballot, an absentee ballot, and I could execute the ballot, put it in an envelope, and then the canvassing committee could open it up on Election Day. So really, if you want to talk about what's fairness, if you want to give everybody a fair shot to accelerate this process, then open up that absentee ballot by permitting people to vote in person, executing a ballot, and putting it in an envelope.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to wrap this up. Anyone else want to speak real quick?
One question, did we correct that about coming to the proxies when it was extended? My understanding is they have till the 18th, 14th. Okay, so that's been corrected, what he, okay.
Okay, I'm going to...
Yes, I'm
Ms. Nancy.
Nancy Forrester from Navarre. And, excuse me, I would like to say first that I agree with Mr. Campbell's proposal. I think that your owners, the residents, are all going to be appalled that you would even consider making a change 8 days before the election. Again, this is going to look like hanky-pank. They are not going to trust you even more. And frankly, I would not be surprised if you did that. I would not be surprised that you would not be facing a class action lawsuit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Forrester.
Mr. Chairman, I do feel compelled to mention again that you have not changed your election policy. Your canvassing board has not changed your election policy. Your canvassing board answered a question and indicated that as the gentleman right before Ms. Foster spoke, a form that had all of the requisite information necessary to verify that it was proper form in the form of a proxy could be acceptable, which is what state law said. Now, your canvassing board has not seen any of these, has not reviewed anything, and has not made any determination, but would do so in accordance with both with state law. So I just want to make sure, and it's very clear, your policy has not been changed. It is true that the person asking the question was doing so because of the delay that was necessitated by the unprecedented snowstorm. Otherwise, your annual meeting would have occurred on the date, and the form of the proxy that the company approved, which had that date specific on it, did not get executed. And therefore, it necessitated an extension of the proxy because proxy is allowed by your bylaws and state law. So I just want to make that clear.
So, Will, are you saying that the ultimate decision will be up to the canvassing board as to whether or not a proxy that's submitted is a valid proxy, and how can you address the concerns that, you know, because it wasn't obtained from Holly Navarre Water System, you know, how do you validate that that is a proxy that was given by a Holly Navarre Water System member?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The job of your canvassing committee is much harder. If we are looking at a document which we didn't produce because we're very familiar with it, and we know the information, it has it on there. But nevertheless, if we get a document, which is a proxy, and it has all of the information, i.e., we are able to verify that the person executing the proxy is a valid member of the water company because only members can vote, and it otherwise indicates the intent to exercise the proxy, then we can determine it to be valid. If it doesn't have that information, we will find it not to be valid, and we'll set it aside, just like we would under any circumstance with any of the documents.
There's no connection to the original signer. You're going to do a signature verification? You?
And that's my point. The way the process, we're not going to recognize anybody screaming from the audience. We're going to recognize them when they come up to the podium. And right now, Mr. Thiel is up here.
Bill Thiel, 2842 PJ Boulevard. Don't have too much to add, just a couple of points that I make. It was mentioned that you voted on the policy for proxy votes, and it was unanimous, and that was the original one. I assume you also did a BAM when you put out the new direction and extended the proxy date to the 14th, and that had to be unanimous because you can't do a BAM without it being unanimous. So I just wanted to clarify that this board has voted twice 100% in favor of the policies and procedures. The other point I would make is I always thought it was understanding that you couldn't be less restrictive than state statutes, but a board could establish policies that were more restrictive. And that would include a policy that requires the things that you require to prevent fraud, waste, and whatever. That's my point.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Thiel.
And one other thought is there a way to set aside questionable ballots or proxies as provisional? I know they do that at the county level when there's a question as to the ballots or the voters, you know, right to vote or whatever. Could we have a provisional set of ballots or proxies that would only be considered if the election was close?
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
mean to
fine,
be hoggy,
Mr. Campbell,
but
that's fine.
my issue goes back to the previous issues with how ballots were collected. And the process we have where you request it from that, they validate your member at the time, as opposed to Joe Campbell, 7146 Wrinkly, and there's a signature. You don't know that's mine. you don't know whose that is. I don't ever vote in this election, and all of a sudden, 6 people on my street with similar signature scribbles are there. That's my concern, as a couple of members have said. That's part of the reason I ran for the board. I saw that stuff. So to me, it's unfair, unethical to some degree, and if we've given every member an opportunity to vote, but that's.
All right,
I'll be quick.
Mr. Foster, real quick.
So, Mr. Dunaway, let me ask you a question, sir. I've been a resident in this community 20 years this year. I've been on my board of directors of the Homeowners Association just about all those 20 years. If I go through my subdivision, 157 homes, and I intimidate you to sign something because I want my people to win, and I bring them back and I present them to Mr. Chairman or whoever I need to present them to, you're okay with that?
Mr. Chairman, I don't answer legal questions from the dais.
Okay,
All right, Mr.
well, I'll accept that as a no. That's what's going on, and I don't think it's fair, and I concur again with
All
Mr.
right.
Campbell and what he's saying.
All right, we have a
Thank you.
motion on the table, and we have a second, and we're going to recognize Ms. Carmen Reynolds real quick.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Carmen Reynolds, Navarre, Board of Directors. Just a few observations. I heard Mr. Deckham say that he came last week and asked for a proxy and was told that the proxies were closed. So there are some disparities here that are disadvantageous to the current candidates, of which I am one. If he was told that the proxies were closed, while at the same time another candidate was out there collecting proxies, there was a disconnect, a disparity there. So that isn't a good thing. A question I think in everyone's mind is, how are you going to verify, just like folks in big cities take all of these vacant properties and they go ahead and match those vacant properties with votes? Who is to say, as Mr. Campbell said, that somebody's scribbled name was actually theirs if in fact there's no eye-to-eye, one-on-one verification with identification? Third and lastly, I wanted to talk about corporate and electoral law with regard to proxies. Typically, they are not, typically proxies are time limited and not done in perpetuity. But one of the proxies that is going around has the people forego all of their voting. They transfer their proxy to this person in perpetuity for all business for Holly Navarre Water System starting February the 18th and subsequent business. So, in other words...
So it's, just to interrupt real quick, I'm sorry, but that would be invalid. The proxies are not valid after 11 months after they've been collected. So if you have a proxy, you can't do it in perpetuity. It has to be for that next election. So that's already, that would already make it invalid.
All right. And finally, being a journalist with a college degree, one of many, the Society of Professional Journalists has a code of ethics. And I am aware that this water system pays South Santa Rosa News for advertising, but ethically it says that these folks that are journalists must act independently and avoid conflicts of interests, real or perceived, disclosing unavoidable conflicts. It is a conflict that that person that is one of them that is collecting these proxies is a person that this body pays for advertising. So they are not unbiased in any way, and one of two things needs to happen. Either the payment to this entity for advertising should be discontinued because of the conflict of interest. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. Yeah.
I think she might be referring to legal ads for bids and things. I'm not aware of any recent advertisements.
Yeah, we don't.
And we have
We don't
subscriptions.
advertise,
We
yeah.
subscribe to the
We
Navarre
don't need
Press,
to.
Pensacola News Journal.
We used to
Some things
do
are
the
just
Hidden Creek, but we
insignificant.
stopped that 2 years ago.
I'm not aware of any.
Yeah. All right. We have a motion on the table. We have a second. Would you like to read the motion again, just to remind everyone?
My motion is that, now I gotta read it, that Holly Navarro Water System follow the process that all 7 directors approved in August of 2024. The proxies forms in any form received from Holly Navarro Water System. And any changes, I'm gonna leave that out. Proxies not obtained via the approved process, if they're turned in, be held and not counted.
And we have a second.
Yes.
Any other discussion from the board? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
Any abstain?
I abstain.
How many?
So Mike abstained, he's on the canvassing committee, so. There was a question whether he could vote on this or not.
There were 6 too.
And there were 6, so we're good.
You guys were pretty
So
unanimous.
fast. Yep. So 5.
No.
It was 5-0 with 1 abstain. All right. So that concludes our meeting tonight. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I'm sorry we had to do this, but... got a motion to adjourn?